If you were raised in a home where your own emotions did not feel safe, your needs were inconsistently met, or perhaps you had a strained relationship with one or both of your parents, then there's a good chance that when you became a parent yourself, it hit extra hard. Hi, I'm Emily Hamblin, neurodivergent mom of four, parent coach, certified teacher, and podcast host. In today's episode of the Enlightening Motherhood podcast, I sit down with therapist Bryana, and together we talk about a lot of the wounds that many parents bring to parenting, how they're showing up, what we can do about them, and especially why self-compassion can be so important in our own growth. Fantastic. Welcome, Bryana. We are so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. Always a pleasure.
Bryana, can you introduce yourself a little bit to us? Tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I specialize in perinatal, infant, and early childhood mental health. I run an online platform I call Conscious Mommy. I have an online membership for parents that are looking to heal their inner child wounds and show up in a more connected and transformative way with their own children. A lot of the parents in my sphere didn't feel like they were parented in ways where their needs were met and responded to, especially in like emotionally attuned and emotionally safe ways. And so we're creating a community to be able to parent differently. And I wrote a book called Parent Yourself First that walks parents through the steps they need to take to become the parents that they always needed.
This is fantastic. And I love your platform, everything you share on Instagram. It's so real. You share a lot of very vulnerable challenges that you have with your mom or that you had with your mom growing up and even as an adult. How do you think that that's shaped some of the work that you're doing today?
It's shaped all of the work that I'm doing today. I don't know if I would have felt called to do the work that I'm doing if it wasn't for what I experienced growing up and this drive I have for things to be different for other people. You know, when we're talking like relational like relational traumas, it's a very different type of trauma than like having like a really bad car accident, right? It's a different kind of trauma. It's like death by a thousand paper cuts because here you are looking to these people in your life who gave birth to you, who you love so immensely, and who intellectually love you and care for you. And, you know that, you can sense that, see that. Yet there isn't necessarily like that deep feeling of connection. Something just feels off. And in childhood, it's very difficult to like put words to what that is. So in childhood, we try to cope with that disconnected off feeling by blaming ourselves. That's what we see happen. We blame ourselves for this disconnect that we can't quite make sense of. And then we become adults and find ourselves reenacting similar patterns. Like, why am I dating my father? Why am I dating my mother? And then we're having our children and we're like, why do I feel like my mother right now? Or why do I relate to my child like they are my parent right now? And I'm having the same reaction to them. So essentially, my like what kind of drove me to where I am is how can we bring more awareness to this like phenomenon of family patterns and intervene as early as possible to set every family up with a healthy, positive trajectory. That was my goal. That's why I chose birth to five and perinatal. So families in the first, like the pregnancy and first year postpartum. If I ran a Mommy and Me program for years and I was having these kinds of conversations in Mommy and Me, right? They're like, how do I get my kid to sleep? And I'm like, let's also think about our relationship that we had with our own parents and how it might be influencing what we expect of these little ones. Sure, I will help you get your kiddo to sleep. No problem. I'll teach you how to introduce solids to your babies. Those are all important subjects too, but they're not the most important subjects because those things are fleeting. What isn't fleeting is the relationship that we are building with these children that will become the blueprint for them on how to be in relationship for the rest of their lives.
This is beautiful. And I know a lot of parents that come to work with me from a good place. They come saying, my child has these challenges. My kid is struggling in these ways, especially a neurodivergent child. Maybe their emotional regulation is through the roof. And the parent says, help me with my kid. And often we really have to start with, okay, let's start with ourselves, not in a I'm the problem sort of way, but in the I can actually be the solution here. What do you have to say about that?
That's exactly right. We have to take the heat off of the kid. The kid is not the change maker in the family. The parent is. And when we parents, us parents, make the changes that we need to make within ourselves, as well as how we are perceiving our children, everything feels lighter. Everything feels simpler. It doesn't necessarily get easier, right? We're still going to have just like the daily trenches of parent life, right?
You mean
We
we're
still
still
got to,
going to be human?
they're still going to be human. We still have to feed them every day. We still have to take them to and from school and sign them up for activities and deal with heartbreak and deal with heartache and deal with homework challenges and deal with just the stress of the world. We're going to have to still deal with that because that's just part of the human experience. But we can do that. We can deal with that from this place of self-awareness, more compassion, and a deeper connection to the process.
I love this so much. Okay, now we're going to dive a little bit deeper. Many parents were raised in ways or had childhood experiences that were not quite ideal, right? That they created some trauma for the parents there. And of course, this is going to show up when we become parents. And I think for many parents, it's kind of easy to mask and get by until you become a mom yourself or a father yourself. And then it just brings up so much past trauma that you didn't even realize was there. What are some signs of trauma or distress that a parent might have?
So parents who are, having like a trauma stress response are going to have really strong reactions often to their children. They will see red very quickly, find themselves reacting sometimes physically toward the child. They might get physically aggressive. They might hit the child or shove the child and then suddenly realize, like, what did I do? And then feel overwhelmed with remorse and, extreme distress over their own behavior. We see like intense flight responses. So get me out of here, shut down, maybe even using substances, alcohol, pot, things like that, as a way to try to disconnect and avoid the stress that they are now experiencing. You might also see just heightened fixing, trying to be perfect. Perfectionism is a trauma response. Busy, staying busy, 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 all the time busy. Got to go here, got to do this, don't have time to sit and rest, don't have time to be
Have to be
present,
productive.
have to be productive. That is a trauma response. So there's really like quite a spectrum. But usually it's usually like a disproportionate response or like an irrational response to any given moment. It doesn't actually make sense to the moment. That's how we know we're having a trauma stress response. Or we're like reacting strongly to something that is developmentally expected. That would even be true in in the neurodivergent community. Let's say you have an ADHD child or suspected ADHD. We know that they have working memory issues. We know that these children often struggle with organizing, strategizing, planning. Being able to like complete a task can be a challenge.
Impulsivity control is a challenge in our house.
Correct. So we know that, and yet we find ourselves reacting intensely to it. That that's how we know like the trauma stress systems are on alert, and it's not about this kid. This kid is just revealing to us what has not yet been resolved.
Okay. So, in other words, could we say when what we know and the way we respond aren't in alignment to each other?
Correct. I like that. That's a good way to synthesize it.
Okay. So, how do some parents tend to deal like without realizing that this is unresolved trauma? What are some methods that they might try to go to handle the stress and the overwhelm that comes?
Well, absolutely. They'll threaten, they'll punish, they'll use punitive measures, they'll tell the child to go to their room. So reenact those patterns of avoidance. They'll try to shut the child down. You cut it out right now, I'll give you something to cry about. So they'll often like that need to have control, which is an instinctual need, right? And especially if you have trauma from your own childhood experiences that made you feel very out of control as a kid.
Mm.
So it would make sense that when your child's behavior is triggering that out of control feeling in your own body, that you react by trying to get control. It makes sense. We're not trying to demonize these protective responses. These responses are there for a reason. What we have to do is unlearn them. Because, of course, we also know in the back of our mind, especially parents in your community, parents in my community, we don't want to parent from a place of coercion and control.
No.
We want to parent from a place of compassion and connection. So, for us to get there, we have to recognize, we have to do that work to be able to recognize what's happening inside for me. That can be a real challenge. If you don't have like a history of somebody helping you recognize what's going on inside for you. And instead, your history is to fight it out, flee, freeze, a stuck, frozen response, or trying to just like anxiously fix everything. If that's your survival response, yeah, it's going to be difficult to practice pausing and noticing.
Mm.
But that's really the work, pausing and noticing what's happening if we want to rewire these responses in our bodies.
Mm. Oh, this is beautiful. I'm going to go straight to the topic of self compassion because I
Mm-hmm.
know that a lot of parents, any parent, I think, when they show up in a way that they don't want to show up in, like, I want to be the kind, loving mom that gets my kids to put their shoes on without screaming, and yet I'm screaming at them to get their shoes on. This was my
Mm-hmm.
own journey. Uh,
Sure.
we feel like garbage, right? We feel like we are a horrible person, a horrible parent. And then it spirals downward. When I shifted everything to having self compassion for myself, even when I was showing up in ways that I hadn't yet figured out another way to show up, it really changed the trajectory of my growth. So, talk to us a little bit about self compassion here and why is it so important when we're dealing with trauma and resolving it in our life?
Self compassion is one of the most important things, one of the most important practices that we can embody because it teaches us how to be gentle with ourselves and appreciate that everything that you just described, that reactivity and it not, and like not being in alignment with how you really want to be, and just like parts of those other parts of you just getting the best of you. It teaches us how to be really gentle and how to appreciate the human experience.
Mm.
And so we have to recognize, I think, in terms of developing a self compassion practice, that we are not alone in all of these phenomenons. We're not the first and we're not going to be the last. It is part of the human experience to react and then have a feeling about how we react.
Mm.
And can we find a deeper sense of kindness for ourselves in that process? That's really the question. And I think the answer is yes. I know the answer is yes. And I know that when we do, we have incredible benefits. We are more present in our relationship with our children. We have like better overall physiological health. We feel, more regulated, more emotionally available. We can experience joy on a deeper level. I mean, there's really just so many incredible benefits to having a self-compassion practice.
Mm.
And it can be just like as simple as, ugh, I hate that I yelled. We're running late. And that's a trigger for me. I'm still working on that.
Mm.
And then we turn to the kids and we say, listen, kids, sorry I yelled. That was not okay. I do need your cooperation to get your shoes on. And we are running late, so we need to move quickly.
Mm.
Right? Repair doesn't have to be this long, drawn out 45-minute experience. It can be simple. And when we allow it to be, there's important things that we're modeling. First, we're modeling what inner kindness and inner compassion looks like for our children,
Yeah.
right? If you want your kids to be hard on themselves, then you should just keep being hard on yourself. If you want your kids to learn how to be a little gentler with yourself, how to take accountability, but like also forgive yourself and move forward and just appreciate that, like, yeah, this is part of being human. Like, we do crappy things, we make mistakes. It's just how it is. And I can take accountability and repair and move on. Then you should model that,
Mm.
right? Because the children are watching. I think where a lot of parents struggle is that they are telling the child, have compassion. They're giving them, they're validating the child, which is
Yeah.
teaching the child compassion and empathy. They're being present for the child's experience and telling them it's okay to make mistakes, but they're not walking the walk themselves.
Mm.
And so the children are hearing the words, right? But what do we know about kids? It's monkey see, monkey do. They do not do what you say. They do what you do.
Mm.
So it almost always like falls back onto what we're doing for ourselves. That's the key. That is the key here. And when we can do that, when we can embody compassion, this work is very deep. This is also just like one piece of
Yes.
the puzzle.
Yes.
But when we can embody that, it does allow us to show up differently for our children.
Mm.
And I think that it allows us to show up in ways that we really want to. It allows us to be in alignment with our goals as parents.
Mm. I love this. And I really love, Bryana, how you mention self-compassion isn't about excusing our mistakes. It's not saying, oh, it's okay that I yelled at my kid, or
Right.
it's okay that I was more rough with them when separating them from their sibling, or
Right.
that's fine because I was doing my best. So it's okay that I did that. No, it's owning it like, oh, that's not the way I want to show up.
Right.
I'm still learning. So I'm going to have my own back here. But instead of, oh, that's not the way I want to show up, and I'm going to hate myself for it, and I'll never be good, and so I'm not going to bother growing, we're
Right.
shifting it more to, ooh, that's not how I want to show up. And I understand that I'm doing my best. I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep growing. And
That's
that's an
right.
incredible difference there.
And that's so beautiful. The emphasis on I'm going to keep growing. Right? We are encouraging our children to do that, right? We are always encouraging our children to learn. What was the lesson here? What did you learn from that experience? I just asked that question last night. What did you learn from that experience? Right? A negative, hard experience for my 4-year-old. And he was able to articulate his lesson in the way that a 4-year-old can, i.e., barely, with some help and support from me. But he was able to take in that lesson and reflect on it throughout the night. And just like we expect, he's able to move forward and not get stuck like a lot of 4 and 5-year-olds do, feeling like a bad kid. Nobody wants me. I'm not lovable,
Yeah.
that big fear of being bad that we see so prominent in that age. He's able to move through it and still see his goodness. That takes a lot of work to be able to do that. And as a parent, that takes a lot of work to be able to do that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it certainly wasn't me at that age.
No.
I was very self-blaming, assumed I was the problem, and held on to that for many years, 20 years.
Mm. I also love here the reminder you have of the way we hear a lot online, and it's, there's some truth to it that the way we speak to our kids becomes their inner voice, but also that reminder of the way we speak to ourselves
Yeah.
becomes our child's inner voice. I had an
Yeah.
experience that shocked me. It was so simple. I walked past the dishwasher that was open with the dishes drying, and I hit my shin on it. And it's probably the 98th time I've done that probably this year. It's something that I do. It's something I do often. And I hit it. I felt the pain. And without even thinking, the words out of my mouth were, oh, I'm such an idiot. And it sounded, this is what was shocking. It sounded exactly like my mother, like the intonation and the timing. It was a direct quote from my childhood. And because she's wonderful and I actually do have a good relationship with her, but whenever she would kick her foot or leg on something, that's exactly what she would say. And I realized I've got to change this or my kids are going to end up repeating it too. My kids weren't around at that time, but just to practice, I said out loud, actually, I'm not an idiot. I just hit my shin on the dishwasher. I didn't see it, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it hurt.
Yeah,
That hurt.
It did hurt.
That
I
hurt.
left a bruise, another one. I have quite a few.
Yeah.
And this, I think, really, it can be the huge shifts. And of course, those are important, but also finding these small shifts and recognizing that's not the way I want my kid to speak to themselves. So I'm going to change how I speak to myself too.
Yeah. That's really inspiring. And also it's, pointing out how these things happen in these micro moments is really crucial. I think for a lot of folks, when they start wrapping their heads around the conscious parenting paradigm, it feels so looming and overwhelming. Do I have to do all of that at once? This is too much. But if we just allow it to just unfold naturally, by increasing our self-awareness, by noticing ourselves a little bit more, just as you did, noticing the reaction that we're having to something so normal, right? Whether it's a you bumped your shin, you had stubbed your toe, or your kid called you mean mommy, right? They do that. So just noticing the reaction that we're having, and maybe even just being a little curious about it. What's this about for me? What's going on here? That might allow us to release a little bit, shift our perspective just the tiniest amount, which can free us in many ways. I mean, this is really how you live a liberated life, when you free yourself from the chains of the way your past conditioning has created you to be.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So let's talk a little bit now more about perfectionism. We mentioned it, that this can be a trauma response or a way. I feel like for those of us that are neurodivergent, this is a way that we try to compensate for the challenges of neurodivergence. For sure, I saw it in myself as a student, as a college student. Oh, I forgot that assignment, so I'm going to triple study for this test and try to make up for it. And it really has not served me in motherhood. So let's talk a little bit about perfectionism, why it's there, and why, compassionately, why it's something that maybe might not be serving us.
Yeah. Well, as you said, perfectionism is something that it's a coping skill to survive. And what are we trying to survive from? We're trying to survive from this feeling of not being enough. And so perfectionism in motherhood, in parenthood, is really insidious, because without realizing it, what we end up doing is projecting that not enoughness onto the kids. They're not doing this block matching activity just right. Here, let me do it for you. Let me show you how to do it. They're not picking up their toys just right. They're not cleaning their room just the right way. They're not throwing that baseball the way that they could be doing it. Then we start to, in this way, like, but look how involved I am. Look at what I'm doing to help you. The way it is received by the majority of children is pressure. And that child then starts to get this message of like, nothing I ever do is enough for her or enough for him. And what does that child think? What's wrong with me? Let me try to be as perfect as I possibly can to try to earn favor. Now, it gets even more difficult when parents are using transactional love. So I will give you my positive love, my affection, my feedback when you're doing well. And when you're not, I will either withhold it or I will criticize you until you live up to my expectations for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keep in mind, again, this is all when the perfectionism is unresolved and not being like the parents aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
This is how they project it on. And this is how that pattern of perfectionism persists. As you said, neurodivergence certainly makes it even more of a complicated conversation because perfectionism is also a social survival tool.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we adopt a perfectionist mask as a way to try to be with people because being with people can feel confusing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Not always easy to pick up on the different social cues and expectations that maybe seem a little arbitrary, or maybe you were called weird once and now you're worried about being weird. Or maybe you're still thinking about something that was said 20 years ago, and you're just perseverating about that moment in your mind. Very common in neurodivergent people.
Yes.
And so what we want to do, we have to recognize what the perfectionism is covering up. And it's those deeper wounds of not feeling enough.
Yes.
And this is where I invite us to learn how to sit with it. I talk about that in my book. I teach parents how to sit with what feels uncomfortable. And it's an acronym. So S means slow down. We have to start getting conscious and intentional about recognizing when the body is amped or when the body is frozen or stuck, and just invite ourselves to slow down for a moment. We internally notice. What can you sense happening? What can you track happening in your body? No, it's this not enough feeling, but what does it actually feel like? Does it feel like nothing? Feel like tension? Does it feel sad? Does it feel fluttery? Does it feel tight? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like you're floating? What can you actually sense? And then T, we're going to talk to it. You see, can we have a dialogue with these sensations and these emotions that we're sensing? Why are they here? Why here? Why now? What is it about this moment that these sensations are present for you? What's the lesson? What are you needing to learn from this moment? And the beauty with a practice like this is when we learn to do that, when we learn to really slow down and sense and have that dialogue, we might learn something really important about ourselves. Right? Maybe you learn in that moment it's safe to be imperfect. There is no one out here that is expecting that of you. Not one person. You're not the main character of everyone else's life. They are the main character of theirs. They are not nearly as concerned with you and your performance as you think they are.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, this perfectionism is how we avoid intimacy, vulnerability, and humility.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to see me being anything but perfect because I'm afraid it will hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid you won't like what you see. And when we get to that and we learn to really be so tender and gentle with those really sad parts that really believe that people won't like what they see if they saw the unmasked, imperfect version of ourselves, start to realize that's actually what people want.
Yes.
Because that's what builds depth.
Yes.
That's what makes the human connection so profound, really, is that it's not this perfect, curated vision. It's actually kind of messy and hard and beautiful and, deep all at the same time.
I love this. It actually makes me think of an analogy that's a little off the path, but stick with me. Years ago, when I first started exercising, I was pretty non-athletic for most of my life. But when I started to exercise, I wanted to do a Zumba class. I waited for a year to go. I lived in a community with a free Zumba class that was like half a mile away. And I waited for a year to go because I was so worried about being an awful dancer. And
Oh,
when I finally went that first time, I was amazed because I realized nobody was looking at me. They
yeah,
were all looking at the instructor trying to dance for themselves. And if anyone did happen to see me and I made a wrong dance move, they were fine with it. They didn't care that I was. Does this make sense?
of
And I
course.
feel like that's what so many of us are doing in parenthood. Oh no, I might do it wrong, so I'm not going to try, or I'm going to
Mm.
hide it, or I'm not going to go and join people or let them see that I'm imperfect, when really everyone's okay with the fact that you're imperfect. They are too. And in fact, they're too busy worrying about their own parenting to judge yours. And maybe they do judge yours, but they're probably not the friend for you, anyways. So,
Yeah, I mean, people who are judging other people are just judging themselves. I mean,
mm,
that's the pattern that they are stuck in. The self judgment, right? That's how you
mm,
work on if you feel like you're judgmental of others. You work on your own self judgment. It
mm,
goes, we just project outward what we're wrestling with inward.
mm,
And yeah, you're so right. This feeling of like an audience
yeah.
really heightens that perfectionism wound and that deep fear of really being seen for all that we are, our strengths and our challenges. And we can't have really authentic, connected relationships with our children if we do not allow them to see our strengths and our challenges.
Mm,
Does that mean that it gives us like free license to act out and, be abusive? No, of course not. But like, you're going to have a moment. You're going to have multiple moments. You're going to have lots of moments where you just aren't the ideal version of yourself. And you're going to clean that messy moment up with a repair, with a moment of connection. And you're going to set the tone that we keep going.
mm,
And this is going to build so much resilience in your child's relationship with you, which is going to teach them that relationships are resilient and strong, and problems that we face in relationships can be dealt with in a healthy way. It's also going to teach your child what type of behaviors they can tolerate and what kind they can't.
mm,
And your commitment to continue to grow really sends a message to your child that we're all worth growing for each other. So your child is going to learn, okay, people are going to hold me accountable, and they're holding me accountable to growth
mm,
and to learning from my missteps. They're not holding me accountable for perfection, which is unattainable
yeah.
and causes stress and anxiety. They're holding me accountable for growth. Great. I can do that. That's tolerable. That's manageable.
This is fantastic. So, to wrap it up, I would love if you can think of just some small examples that parents could relate to of what self compassion looks like in everyday moments, particularly for parents who are trying to break that generational cycle.
Yeah, it's as simple as taking a moment, pausing, and saying, this is hard. I'm struggling. You just name it. If you want to take it a step further, you can frame it. I didn't have parents who showed me how to manage this kind of intensity that I'm seeing. Let's say your kid's tantruming.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have parents who showed me how to like stay present when a kid is this upset. Or maybe you frame it like this: I'm freaking exhausted. I did not sleep well last night. I just don't have the spoons for what's happening here in front of me. I'm drained, burnout. And then you can take it one step further if you'd like, and you can claim it. It is not my child's job to meet my needs. It's my own job. I am responsible for my own needs. Who's the hungriest in this situation? Is it my kid or is it me? I'm going to respond to whoever is the hungriest.
Mm. That is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. So as we wrap this up, we'll make sure that people know where to find you. I'm sure everyone wants to connect with you, but do you have a final message for parents who maybe feel like they're struggling still with that trauma from their childhood, or maybe they're struggling with the perfectionism and having that self-compassion, even though they're not perfect, because none of us are? Do you have any final message for them?
Yeah. Don't do this work alone. Do it with people that see you, hear you, understand you, and help you feel safe. We were never meant to manage the complexities of the human condition on our own. We are built to do it in community and in connection with others that, you know, are available to us. So surround yourself with people who really can support you and make a plan to start doing this work. And it doesn't have to be fast. You can just take your time with it. There is no urgency. I know it feels urgent, but there really isn't urgency. You can take your time.
I love that so much. Thank you. Where can people connect with you? I'm sure they'll want to.
Well, the best place is going to be through my website. That's where you can find out about all of my offerings, consciousmommy.com. Otherwise, I'm on social media, Conscious Mommy on Facebook, TikTok, Conscious Mommy Co. on Facebook. Wait, did I just say Facebook? I meant Instagram. Conscious Mommy on Instagram and TikTok, Conscious Mommy Co. on Facebook because somebody already had Conscious Mommy.
Okay, awesome. We will make sure to include your website down in the show notes, and I'm sure it has the links everywhere else. Thank you
Yes.
again for joining us today. This was fantastic.
Thank you, Emily.